Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
Totally fine.
Okay,
all right.
so
Ashley,
that
you're...
totally gets into my theory. So I was telling Merlin, Liz, before you jumped on, I was like, oh yeah, I was thinking about like our team dynamic and, thinking for a long time, which is, the last 10 minutes. I like to take a break from work and do like yoga in the middle of the day. Helps me like restart. So I was thinking, and I was like, you know what? Us, the three of us, we're like the Harry Potter characters.
How?
Okay, so Liz, you are Hermione because you're always like over prepared and like write like a 15,000 word paper for only a 5,000 word paper, and you're like always on top of things and like getting things done. And I'm like Harry Potter because I'll like do the bare minimum to get by, that I look like, look good doing it or whatever. And then Merlin is totally Ron because he does nothing and expects everyone else to do the work for him.
And just kind of like coasts off our efforts, like goes along
and he's like,
for the ride.
and he's like the comedic relief, like Ron was always like funny in the books, and so I gave us a lot of thought clearly in like the last 10 minutes.
Well, I think from a preparedness perspective, Ashley said you skimmed it, right?
Yeah.
I actually was reading it and I just ran out of time.
Yeah, no, I didn't read it. I was like,
my calls all went long. So like the breaks I had this morning weren't as long as I had planned. So I only like thoroughly read 5 or 6 pages.
Yeah, I skimmed maybe like 4 out of the 30 pages.
Right.
And Merlin
I had
did.
intentions to look at it and haven't even clicked the link.
See, that fits. I mean, Hermione
Totally
would
fits.
have had the whole thing read like multiple times, but
That's true.
Yeah. Anyways, so hopefully you guys, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if they don't know the characters well enough to like make that connection, but who hasn't seen Harry Potter?
But now the question is, I don't think you're both Gryffindor, so it wouldn't hold true.
That's true. I am. Well, it is true though, because if I'm Harry, I am Slytherin actually, and he was supposed to be in Slytherin. But
Are you Slytherin?
I am. I've taken multiple tests. I am Slytherin. Does that surprise you? You like?
I don't. I am disappointed at how many Slytherins I have in my life.
I'm sorry that I'm a disappointment to you. But I'm a good one. I'm like Harry, right?
Are there?
It's not like the Slytherins are all bad. They just get a bad rap because of like a few landmark
like Voldemort.
Slytherins. Right.
A few evil
And
people that
the
rule the
Malfoys.
world.
Yeah, but Draco ended up not being so bad at the end.
Right. I mean, the whole thing with Slytherins, right, is that they're incredibly smart, just a little
And
bit
cunning
vain.
and clever. Yeah. I would totally describe myself with all those words that you just said, Merlin.
And Merlin, what are you?
Apparently, I'm Hufflepuff, so I guess I'm just bumbling and happy-go-lucky. I don't really know. That's sort of my impression.
I would have guessed Ravenclaw. Wouldn't
Maybe
you?
you need to retake the test.
I think so, because I would have guessed Ravenclaw.
I don't think you're a Hufflepuff at all. I would have guessed Ravenclaw too.
Yeah, I would have thought that myself, but the official website told me that I was in Hufflepuff, I guess. Which
You and Sedward are like best friends then. Or I call him Sedward because of he was both in Harry Potter and in Twilight. Cedric Diggory, my bad.
Yes, I guess so. Would have been BFS.
Interesting.
So I'm guessing you're Gryffindor then, Liz? Because you were very disappointed that neither of us would be.
Yeah, I figured neither of you were.
Wow.
What did you think that we were then? So you said Merlin was Ravenclaw. What did you think I was? Hufflepuff?
I don't know. I guess I hadn't.
She probably thought you were Hufflepuff.
For sure. That's why she doesn't want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. As she's looking down at us from
I'm
her
like,
high
no.
Gryffindor horse, like, all you non-Gryffindors down there.
From her high tower.
I'm insulted.
You called me Hufflepuff. I'm the one who should be insulted.
I had not thought about it long enough to say.
It's awesome though. I could see Ron being in Hufflepuff though, Merlin. So maybe you are really Hufflepuff. Like
Yeah.
the comedic relief. That's what I always think of.
I know. So what's the topic? What's our topic today?
Is it managed versus unmanaged, or are we just talking about like the pros and cons of both, how you use them, when and why? I assume that's the
Yeah,
direction.
I guess I would put that in terms of a versus.
Okay.
It's a battle. It's a solutions battle. Managed versus unmanaged solutions.
Battle of the solutions.
Battle of the solutions.
Solutions gauntlet.
Right. So we're going to have to choose a side. I know that Liz is on team unmanaged.
Unless you're an
Actually,
ISV.
Right. Well, that's an exception. We'll set that one aside. Ashley, which side do you come down on?
I don't know. Like 3 years ago, I would have been unmanaged.
Well, but you can't judge it from 3 years ago because it was different then.
I know. So I think that there are benefits, obviously pros and cons to both. So like I live in an unmanaged world, so it's hard for me to be like, oh, I hate, like, unmanaged is not the way to go, because that's the world I live in right now. Like even when I move solutions into my production, so I don't know. Like I should probably say managed just for the sake of standing by how I use my system.
Right. All right. So Ashley, Switzerland. It's all like
Imagine
waving
that
a white
Ashley
flag.
agreed to disagree. Shocker.
That is crazy. I guess that means then I have to take the side of managed solutions. They're the best, and you should use them for everything always.
Which I
There.
know is a change from how you used to feel.
Oh yes, that's 100% true.
Because you used to stand on a soapbox and like preach why unmanaged was a better option.
Merlin on a soapbox.
And I'll
I
go
can't
figure.
imagine.
Okay, so but this is why I'm saying you can't judge it from 3 years ago because it was different then.
You've
Like
converted.
Microsoft has been saying you should be using managed solutions since they first developed the concept in 2011. And that was a terrible idea in 2011. Like absolutely the worst idea, unless you were an ISV. Like they were built for ISVs. They were not built for like moving your own stuff from your test gear to production environment. Like that's not, no, you couldn't do it then. So yes, I stood on my soapbox and I railed against managed solutions.
Well, some people tried to use them back then, like in 2013, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
And I remember quoting projects where like the project was rebuilding the environment to get them out of managed solutions. Remember, like, I know you remember that client too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so the reason I'm neutral though is because like think of a customer that has been on it since then, 2011, 2013, even 2016, because I was still using unmanaged, just that's all, right? Nothing managed in 2016. So if you think of like people who've been on the environment since then, they have this unmanaged layer.
Mhm.
So like how do you then like turn it and convert it into a managed environment? That is really difficult to do. So that's why I'm Switzerland, because in theory, I would love to live in a managed world. I don't think it's practical if you're not a new implementation. If you have an existing implementation with unmanaged changes, it's really difficult, and you can't move to managed without building a whole new environment.
That's probably true. I guess, why do you have to? Like, is there a reason that you can't just leave your unmanaged stuff as it is and just use managed going forward, which I assume is kind of how you're doing things now, right?
Yeah, so that is what we're doing, or I'm doing now. I shouldn't say we, I'm doing that now. But the problem is that there's unmanaged changes in the solution that's higher than all my managed solutions. So I could try to change something, but because it's an unmanaged layer, it's never going to change unless I go in and change the unmanaged layer in my production only, which I have been known to do because I'm trying to move to this unmanaged world. But like if my unmanaged solution is higher, like there's nothing I can do about it.
Right. And obviously that's like a no, but like what other options do you have in that situation?
And I actually asked Microsoft, I submitted a ticket and was like, we're unmanaged, now we're following your guidelines, and they said delete it. It's like I'm not deleting the unmanaged, like who knows what's in there. So their only solution was to delete it, which I don't think is feasible.
Right. Well, I mean, that kind of turns into, then you just turn everything into managed, right? So you get like all of the changes and all of the everything that you want, and you put it in managed solutions, and then you cross your fingers like this, and then you delete all your unmanaged solutions, and probably it'll be fine. Actually, technically,
Probably.
I think it has to be fine, because when you delete an unmanaged solution, it doesn't actually delete anything out of the database. All it does is take away the solution record. It doesn't take away anything that's in the solution. But then you could still be left with unmanaged layer things that are just kind of kicking around in there that you don't necessarily now like know are there.
Right. And so that's why I say, like, for a new implementation, like if I was starting over today, didn't have an environment, was starting brand new, I would do unmanaged in my sandbox and my dev just to make sure things work, and then move everything to as managed, up like to test and QA or test, training, production. That's how I would do it. I mean, that's how I do it right now, but it's not wonderful.
Liz, would you do that today?
Well, I am on the project I'm currently on because it's Microsoft's recommendation, but I personally am still a holdout on unmanaged. So I want you to, what?
I'd love to hear why stay unmanaged.
It's like just a historical preference thing. Like I've just not adapted, and I'm not as comfortable with like the new functionality within me. Like I just haven't had as much experience or exposure to it, and so it's just a getting comfortable with it thing, I think.
Just resisting change.
Right, just a normal human. I want to keep it the same. It's more comfortable that way.
I'm gonna be honest with you, Liz. Like, if I wasn't at the company I am now with, like, because they had already moved to this like structure of managed and unmanaged solutions, and how they like, I would probably still only use unmanaged solutions if I hadn't moved to this company and had like fallen into their structure. So like, I can totally see that. I mean, I used to just move unmanaged solutions all over the place between like a test and a production and not even worry about it. Now it's a lot more, you have to put a lot more thought into it.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I'd like to be, the strong advocate for managed solutions, I feel like it makes a lot of sense if you have a lot of complexity, right? If you've got like multiple different dev paths going on, you've got like all these different dev environments, and you got to like bring all these changes together from all your different teams and make sure they don't like conflict with each other before you move them into production. And if you move it into production and something goes wrong, you want to like back it out right away. Like managed solutions give you a good path for doing that. And so that's kind of your best practice, like ALM model, like, okay, I need to manage my application lifecycle, and the best proper way to do that is managed solutions. And presumably in that situation, you'd end up with like an automated development pipeline. You like set it all up through Azure DevOps so that you can just move the solutions automatically. And then you don't run into like weird problems of like, oh, I ran into these dependencies and now I can't get the solution to move and all this other stuff. But like on the other side of that, especially in smaller organizations where you've only got like, I don't know, 20 or 30 users or something, and you're all basically using the same functionality. And if something breaks for a few minutes, nobody's going to get upset while they wait for you to fix it because like they all know you by name. Fine, just do unmanaged. I mean, who even needs a dev environment then? Just, develop in production.
We know how you feel about that, Merlin, just doing stuff right in production.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't doing that right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I heard about it behind your back that you were, so.
Oh, no doubt. I'm sure that I've gotten some heavy sighs from our solution architect.
I mean, one of the things you touched on there, and Liz, you brought it up too, is ISV solutions. I mean, if you're working with multiple partners even, so if you have multiple dev people working on your environment, I can see where managed solutions are helpful because it separates the work, makes sure nobody's overriding each other. That can be really harmful to the system. So I, for example, have 3 different developers in my system who have their own sandbox environments. So it's like, to make sure that nobody's overriding things, we use managed solutions for better or for worse.
That's true.
Yeah, and I am 100% like, you have to use a managed solution if you're going to be an ISV or deploying something, publicly. Like that's not a question. But yeah, internally for an SMB deployment, I don't know. I'm on the fence. So I know you both voted for managed. So like from your perspective, how are managed solutions better for an enterprise deployment?
I mean, so like I said, it gives you like proper, I'll put proper in air quotes, proper application lifecycle management, right? So you can, similarly to how you would do in the past with like custom developed work, you put together your solution, you can put it in place, you can apply patches to it now that Microsoft supports patching on solutions. And then like if something breaks, then you can do a rollback and you just delete the solution and it rolls all your stuff back to the way that it was. Historically, that didn't work very well. And so that's why jumping into the managed solutions in 2011 or 2013 didn't always work out, because then you'd be like, oh, I'll just roll back and delete the solution. And like, it either wouldn't delete or it wouldn't delete all the things, or would delete too many things, or you'd be like, I don't know what's going on, but now my system is even worse off than it was before. I think now all that stuff actually works. So you can do it that way and sort of follow that proper formal process. I don't know, again, for internal development, I think like there are some things that managed solutions help you with a lot, especially like Ashley, you're talking about, there's some stuff you can just never change with your solution because it's in that unmanaged layer. Like if you didn't have to worry about that, you could adjust everything with your managed solutions, and you could do like full testing on it in other environments before you promoted it to production.
Right.
On the flip side, if everything in production is unmanaged, you can just copy it back into a dev environment and be like, ta-da, I magically have a new dev environment and it's an exact replica of production. So I don't know, there are pros and cons.
Yeah, I'd say like the two benefits, which I mean, Marilyn talked a lot about like official process and procedure. I would say one of mine is way less. I'd say the first one though is the rollback. Like that's ever since I've been involved in Dynamics, the first thing a steering committee or an IT director will ask me like, okay, cool, you're going to go forward with this change. What if it doesn't work? And I'd be like, well, you know what I mean? That's a really awkward question to answer. And I'd always lie and be like, oh, we're going to roll back. But then, you know, everything hits the fan and then you're kind of like, oh yeah, we just have to do these couple of things, which leads into my second thing is that managed solutions prevents me from doing things directly in production. I was like Merlin as an admin, if I was the only person in my system. So I'd be like, this isn't working. Let me just go fix it in production. And like, I'll take a copy down to our test later, or I'll, you know, do it in both environments. And then like the schema names are off. And, you know, you just don't think of those things. Cause like when everything is blowing up and you have salespeople calling you that something's broken, like your first instinct is like, okay, I'm just going to go fix it. But now we have like a policy and a procedure for how to like roll things up rather than just doing things ad hoc. So that's honestly, so that has nothing to do with like policy procedure, but that's just a prevention of just making weird changes on the fly in production.
It's true.
Which I would still do today if I could. So
I mean, that's a really good point, right? Like that's part of proper application lifecycle management is you just don't go mess with your production system. And so
it takes
process
longer to get a fix rolled out though, if you have to go deploy that managed solution through multiple environments to like, let's say like change a view, like something super simple.
Yeah.
Which does, but
no, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say it does, but it also like I've had salespeople or end users come to me and say, oh, like you said, a view, can't we just change that? I know you can just go in and change it really quick. You've done it before. But like now I'm like, well, you know, you have to submit it has to get approved. Like we have now a process to even just approve those kinds of things. It's small. I mean, the approval might just be me saying, sure. But you know what I mean? I think it just also, you can better track what changes are being done in your system. So I think, again, everything has a pro and a con, right? Like takes longer, but you have better tracking history.
So what I was going to jump off of there is, I think Liz, you said you have to move that solution. And this leads me to a question, I think based on some of the talking you've done about your current project, which is, it sounds like you have everything is all in like one giant managed solution. And so anytime you're changing something.
Not anymore, because it's too slow to move it.
Right.
But,
So I feel
but
like
there
that was going to be
are
my jump.
multiple dev tracks though. Like it's just one deployment. And so I'm breaking one deployment up into smaller pieces.
Which I think can still be a good idea.
Mhm.
And I guess that was going to lead to my sort of question / point, which is you can still have things in managed solutions, but maybe having like one managed solution for like my entire system is in this managed solution, I would argue is not a best practice, because that's going to like end up in weird issues.
Well, you know what's funny is I still manage my managed solutions like I did my unmanaged. Like I still break up, like I do monthly updates. I still create a new solution for that and move it through, even though I know I could just like patch the old one or update the version. Like for me, it's just easier to say, okay, this is what I did this month and here's what's included in it, and keep that, record in Jira or Azure DevOps or something. So I still manage. I probably don't manage it the way you're supposed to do managed solutions because I come from that unmanaged background.
Yeah, and I do too. So like what would Merlin, you're saying like don't have everything in one solution. If you have a set of change, like you're deploying all this at one time and it's pre go live, like how would you recommend splitting up your managed solution then?
I mean, well, I guess I'll take some of the issues that you ran into and suggest that you keep your flows in their own solution, just because they might be annoying if you're trying to move them with other like model driven app configuration.
Which we do now.
Right. I don't know, I guess in a situation where you're doing a new implementation and it's pre-go live, I would probably break it up into like functionality groups, like a customer service solution.
There's just one team. There is just one persona.
Then I guess you're stuck with just one big solution.
That's my point. It's like 10 users. It's basically all like the same functionality. It's an XRM deployment.
Yeah.
It's not like there's different work streams or different groups of, it's not like we're deploying like sales and service at the same time.
I guess that's true.
The solution still takes a very long time to move though.
Right. But if it's a new implementation, I don't expect that you have to deploy that managed solution more than a couple of times to test before go live.
Well, how else do you get your changes?
Well, you could patch your managed solution. The patches don't have to be the whole thing.
I am not allowed to patch.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like you're having a sword fight with one arm tied behind your back.
Well, so I mean,
the other thing I put into its own solution are command bar changes, because if you're using the Ribbon Workbench and XRM Toolbox, if the solution's too big, that thing just basically like fails or takes forever. And so I do have always, and I've done this even not with managed solutions, but just in general, have a solution just for that purpose.
I do too. It's just easier.
I will say, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Liz.
I was going to say the other kind of gotcha, which I think is completely irrelevant probably to manage versus unmanaged, is that mobile offline profiles only move properly the first time you move them and not after that. And so if you're looking at deploying mobile offline, have a plan for how to make updates to those not through a solution.
There are some just settings things that I know you're supposed to move through a solution, but it's a setting. And so there are some things that I probably do and change on my back end without, on the back end of the system without a solution, because I consider it just, hey, this is just settings. But you could move it through a solution, but I don't, because it's just a setting. So I know that I've been talked to about that before by vendors, like, hey, don't do this. But, I think that there are some gray areas here.
It's fair.
Like field security profiles is the one that comes to mind.
Oh.
They move with, why wouldn't you move those through a solution?
Because like it's a setting.
But you have to recreate them.
No, like if it's a change to an existing one.
Oh, and that's the only thing you need to change. Mm-hmm. Sure.
To me, like, so I could see that you bucket some things as just a setting, and I can make those changes. I think that, but like to your plan for it, right? Or what you said, like plan for what you're going to say is a setting versus what needs to be moved through a solution.
Yeah, and I guess security would make sense. You might not Like you might not always be making those changes in your dev environment because that's just your dev environment. You're not dealing with security there.
Mm.
Yeah, like the field level security profiles also have users and teams. So like like I know some like all of our users are not in the dev or the sandbox environment. And so like there's still going to be manual changes that you need to add those users to that profile once it's in prod.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting points.
Ashley,
Where did we come
wanna...
down?
Oh no.
Oh,
What was that, Marlon?
I was just wondering, like, have we resolved the debate? Managed versus unmanaged? We probably have not.
I'm glad you said that because Liz was about to pick on me.
I know. I'll save it for later.
Oh, you can. Go ahead, Liz.
No, it's off topic now.
I don't know if there's actually like I would say there's an in practice, like, I don't know. I don't know if there's one answer because I think it's different for every company. I think it depends on your complexity, your size, how much, if you only have, like you said, Liz, if you only have one module that you're using, you know, if you're only using sales and not also customer service, marketing, field service, you know, the whole slew of everything. So I don't ever want to say that there's like the only one way that you should do this, because I think it really truly depends on your environment. And who do you like? If you have an admin and they're the only person doing things in your environment, I think that's a different answer than having partners involved.
I was going to say, though, I think Microsoft formal recommendation is to always use managed solutions. So if you're going by the book, it should be managed solutions. But they have also said that, to our earlier point, for many, many years, even before they were really practical to use in an internal deployment.
Having taken several of those certification exams, there's a lot of things that Microsoft tells you to do in a certain way that, you know, just in practice, it doesn't work that way the best. So I also want to throw that out there. There's the Microsoft there, here's how you do it, and here's how in practicality it actually works out for you.
That's true. That's true. I do think, I guess, I feel like,
not that I want to make Microsoft mad with that. Sorry, Marilyn, go ahead.
Don't worry. I'm sure they're fine.
I'm sure they're not listening.
I doubt that the test writers are listening to our podcast.
They might be.
It might be.
Yeah.
It might be. Well, if there are any test writers out there, you need to actually use the application you're writing your test for.
Marilyn went there.
Wow.
I went there. So I feel like managed solutions are a good idea in current dynamics. And I think that they are only useful if you are also allowed to use all of the patching components, because that's also like part of the design that makes them work.
Can you explain how patching works?
I can try. So a patch allows you to do a small amount of configuration change to configuration that is within a defined solution, a managed solution. So this is assuming that you're like doing your proper version numbering as well. So like I deploy a managed solution version 1.2, and then I realize that I need to make, say, a change to a view. I don't want to change the view and turn that into managed solution version 1.3. I just want to patch 1.2 with just that new view. So I would go create a patch off of the original solution, make the change to the view, and then deploy that patch, and now it's 1.2.1, whatever. The patches can only be applied to the right parent. So if you were sitting on that patch zip file for a month and somebody else deployed 1.3, and then you tried to apply your patch, be like, no, this only applies to 1.2. You can't apply it to 1.3. And you can, if I'm remembering this correctly, you can, if you deploy a bunch of patches to 1.2, then when you get to 1.3, you can roll all the patches together into 1.3 with any other changes that you're making to redeploy that. So it's like real proper code development, like patch management, solution management. But if you're not using patches, then to your point, you want to make one tiny change. You got to go make that tiny change, and then you have to redeploy your entire solution all over again. That's not only going to be a waste of your time, but you're just sort of asking for trouble trying to re-import all of these 1,000 things all over again when most of them didn't change.
Well, and it's not usually that difficult. It's just a time consuming process to download it and import it. Like it just
Yeah.
takes a long time. Or maybe my
Yeah.
internet's horrible.
No, I agree. I mean, even when I have small solutions, I feel like it takes a while, and then I go do something else, and then 6 hours later, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was supposed to move this solution.
Right. I think to that point of, oh, I just want to make a small, fast change. That's what the patch is for when you're still in that managed environment.
I agree. I've used patches before, and I think it's really helped me coming from that unmanaged world of where I could just go make a change really quickly and easily. So I think the patches are, I didn't know that was new, I guess. I'm new to the managed solutions
New.
world. So all of this is like new to me.
Yeah.
Can we talk about maybe troubleshooting solutions? I think that's would apply to managed or unmanaged, but I know like there's issues, right? Like there's failures, error messages, because I have found you can import it through either the classic interface or the maker portal.
Mhm.
And that is switching between, like they give you different details and that sometimes one place is more helpful than the other. And so if you are running into an error, I'd say check both places.
That's kind of interesting
So
that they give you different errors.
It is.
Yeah, so
Like
the
one
way
can be very generic, but be more detailed in the other spot.
and that's funny because I actually use a solution dependency checker in XRM Toolbox. So if ever I run into errors, I just throw my and it only works for managed solutions. So if you throw your managed solution in there, it'll tell you what the error means, what you're missing, that kind of thing. So if it says that you're missing entities, sometimes Microsoft is not great on telling you exactly what things it is, but the dependency checker will. So I have actually, when you're switching from an unmanaged to a managed world, that has saved my life because I had to turn a lot of things into managed that were not before. So
That's a good point. I feel like my biggest frustration is always like, okay, I get an error. I'm like, great. And I resolve that error. And then I have to try it again to get to like the next error. It's like there are actually 6 errors in here, but I got to do them one at a time because it's only going to like hit the first one and then blow up at me.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other troubleshoot. I mean, like tips I have. That's the only issues I've really, or just making sure everything's activated. That's a dumb mistake I make all the time. I leave like a business process flow or a business rule and deactivated. Always check for that. It's
and your
so
flows.
simple. Yeah, like it sounds so simple, but like it has caught me so many times where I'm just working so fast and forget.
Yep. I feel like maybe it's those things. Isn't there something that like when you import it in a solution, it automatically deactivates it?
It used to be the duplicate detection rules, but I don't think that happens anymore.
Oh, okay.
That was just like if you published a change to that entity's metadata, like regardless of if it was through a solution or not, the rules would automatically unpublish and you'd have to remember to republish them. But I haven't noticed that being an issue anymore. I think they fixed it at some point in time.
I don't have them turned on, so I wouldn't know. Duplicate detection rules.
But nothing else automatically kind of turns itself off like that I can think of.
I guess the only other like tip or check, and this is again does not have anything to do with like managed versus unmanaged, but make sure that you only have what you need to change in your solution. Because if you have additional extra things like accidentally move something you're not supposed to, or you're going to get errors that are not actually applicable to what you're trying to move. So the place that I have found this the most often is like if you're on the account or the opportunity and you're trying to add a lookup to the user. So you just want to identify like, hey, this person's, the customer service rep for this account. And do you do a lookup to the user? In the new interface in the maker portal, automatically will add the entire user entity, everything, all of its attributes, whether they're managed, unmanaged, everything into your solution, even though you don't need it. You just need that relationship. So
I think to that point, like when the system says like, hey, you're missing required components from your solution, don't add those because you're going to just keep you're just going to indefinitely add more things. Just ignore that. And if it's not in
it'll be like, you didn't include accounts.
Yeah. But I've seen people go down that path where it's like, no, you're never going to get that message to go away.
I agree. I think it's just I don't know how it like adds all that stuff, but it's just finicky. Don't get discouraged if you're hitting errors. We all do.
It's true.
Any last
Right.
thoughts from you guys on your love or hate for managed or unmanaged solutions?
Any like differences or other challenges between the two? Yeah, that you guys have seen?
I don't know.
I
I mean,
say
I
my
used to do a
biggest-
whole class on this.
So my biggest challenge is just that unmanaged solution layer. Like if you're starting a new implementation, I feel like it's easier to manage, but if you're a historic environment, it can get a little more complex.
That's true. Yeah, I guess that's some key differences. Your unmanaged changes will always take precedence over any managed changes because that layer is above the managed layer.
And you said this
Um,
before, Liz, make sure any ISV or partner puts anything as a managed solution, because I've seen that happen before where it's unmanaged.
Are you serious?
Mhm.
Wow. That's not, yeah, for
Not
sure.
Well, that's not cool at all.
No.
Also keep in mind, if you have an unmanaged solution, you can delete the solution at any time and nothing else will get deleted. But if you delete a managed solution, it will take everything out that isn't in another solution already.
And you can lose data.
Yes,
It's not just your configuration changes.
no. If there's a field that only exists in that one managed solution, you delete that managed solution, the field will go away. But if
I think that's a
you
really
have it
important thing for
unmanaged,
people to
it is.
understand.
I have to tell you, this
Yep.
whole concept has terrified me since I started working with solutions, that I've never deleted a solution, because like it terrified that whole concept, like what could
Well, you
get
can-
removed.
You can safely delete your unmanaged solutions because they don't really contain anything. They just
Mhm.
point at things. But yes, you do have to be a little bit careful with the managed ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Otherwise, I don't know. Do whatever you want, kids. If you're listening and you don't know, this hasn't helped you make a decision, just do whatever you want.
Don't test.
Oh, we
Do
can
all
learn
your
his way.
changes right in production.
Yeah.
It's what Merlin does. I hear.
I mean, sometimes that's what's called for.
I
Not very
guess
often.
the last thing I'll throw out there, like since we're talking about solutions, is to actually like use a publisher, like set up a publisher that makes sense for your organization or whatever you're working on. Like you don't don't use the new underscore, please.
No, or the like organization default, like
Yeah.
CR
No.
and like 15 numbers.
No, yeah, make a publisher that makes sense for your organization.
Yes, please. Oh, one last note. If you are doing managed solutions, keep an unmanaged copy somewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Because if you lose the unmanaged copy, you can never again make changes to that managed solution.
Correct.
which would be terrible.
Yeah. I actually, fun story, long ago, former partner employer of mine, they had built something as all managed solutions, and then at some point like lost or wiped out the dev environment. And then the customer was like, hey, we need to make a couple of changes to this. And they were like, oh, actually
There-
need to rebuild the whole thing.
There was no unmanaged copy
Oh.
anywhere.
Man.
Oh,
There was no like backup that they could go back to.
like I got an email from one of the consultants there like 8 months after I had left that was like, so is there any chance that you have an unmanaged copy of this because we can't find one? It's like,
Oh.
"Yeah, sorry."
Horrible.
That's brutal.
Yeah. It's kinda-
Yeah.
So keep an unmanaged copy.
I feel like that's like a whole other topic. Like, what things have we done wrong, and we'll tell you about them so you don't do them. Because like
It's true.
I've made a lot of those.
I've only made one or two.
So Merlin's
Typical Merlin.
perfect.
Typical-
Overconfident.
typical me. Exactly. All right. I have no other thoughts.
Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.